Hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Lucy Heavens and I'm the VP of Marketing at Salv. So over the next 45 minutes, we're going to be looking at how financial institutions are managing the process of screening transaction and customers. So before we kick off, I've just got a few quick housekeeping items to run through. So firstly, the format of today's webinar is a fireside chat. So I'm going to be having a very cozy and hopefully lively debate with my fantastic industry expert here. Secondly, we would love to hear from you. So we've allowed time for questions throughout the webinar today. So please feel free to type them in and I will bring them into the conversation. And then finally, a recorded version of this webinar will be available and sent directly to your inbox after we've finished. So before we start this, the panel discussion, I just wanted to take a minute to set the scene and give a little background as to why we're discussing this topic today. So as I mentioned, we're going to be looking at how financial institutions manage the process of screening transaction and customers. And in today's world, where financial transactions occur with unprecedented speed and volume, although it might seem like a basic requirement, I think the need for a robust screening process has never been more critical. So verifying the information that's attached to a transaction or a person to ensure that it doesn't present red flags for financial crime is one of the best ways that we can reduce the risk of an organization and customers being victim to financial scams. And I actually have a fun fact for you. So it was recorded in history that the idea of sanctions actually goes back to ancient Greece in 432 BC, where Athens imposed a trade embargo on the city of Megara, if I'm saying that right, which set a precedent for the modern economic transactions of today. Fun fact. Enough of a history lesson. Let's jump into today's discussion because I'm sure you're really excited to hear from my special guest here today. So hello, Taavi. Can you please introduce yourself to our audience?
Hello, everyone. I'm happy to be here, but happy to have so many listeners behind the screens as well. And I'm a Taavi. I'm a co-founder of Salv and CEO right now. But in my heart, I'm actually a mathematician and crime fighter. So I just counted. I've been studying mathematics in different levels for 25 years. I'm a PhD dropout from data science PhD. But I've done only 20 years crime fighting using my math and data science skills. And obviously, as you can imagine, then combining mathematics and crime fighting together, for me, it means that it's all about data and how we use data to beat financial crime. And that's what I've been doing back in Skype, where I was heading the fraud and fraud data science team. That's what I was doing at Wise or TransferWise, where I built up the AML, KYC verification products and operational teams. Of course, it was a lot about people management, technology, but for me, everything circulated around the data and how I can use data in a better way, best ways to apply the sanctions controls, to run the monitoring, intelligence sharing with other counterparties. So it was all about data for me.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And let's jump into discussion then, because I'm really keen to kind of pick your brains on this. So when was your first experience then, going back to those kind of very early days, when was the first experience of doing customer and transaction screening?
Actually, it's quite funny because I'm thinking it was exactly 11 years ago when I joined Wise or TransferWise as head of compliance, although I didn't know anything about compliance back then. So I started to read guidances from UK. There was this famous GMLSG guidance, which explained how the FCA regulations should be applied. And I found out in my first week at Wise, I found out that there was like a nice little internal tool, which was called sanctions screening. It wasn't even a product. And every week, one of my jobs was actually to go to the website of public sanction pages like UN, European Union, UK, US, of course, like OFAC list providers, and I downloaded their CSV files and I copy pasted these CSV files like to my laptop, and then from my laptop into this internal tool, and I uploaded, and then I clicked run, and then I started to use these 4 lists on my behalf to check all the customers against looking for particular matches. and also transactions. And I remember that it was based on the simple Levenstein distance. Levenstein is like one distance measure between two text strings that people can use. Again, it was like way off from the best practices even back then, but like now I've realized that there is like much more accurate algorithms, functions that can be used to compare these text matches. But yeah, it was a start for me, and like I had to do it every week. Full disclosure, maybe some weeks I forgot it, so it was fine. Like we still found suspicious people, but the regime was like very soft back then, which again 11 years ago, it wasn't that long time ago, but the regime was like not that demanding as today, definitely.
Yeah, that sounds quite like a sort of quite manual sort of process, but then a really good learning opportunity. I think to kind of see where the potential gaps are, I suppose. So I was doing a little bit of research to understand the kind of scale of non-compliance around this. And I came across a few examples of where the fines were super high. I was really surprised, actually. So there was one from Binance where they were fined 3.9 billion euros in 2020, or in this year, earlier this year. There was Danske Bank were fined 1.8 billion euros last year. So both are violating anti-money laundering regulations by having poor internal controls, which basically means they weren't doing as good a job as you was, that their screening didn't pick up the bad actors that they onboarded, and that money laundering was occurring. So can we kind of, again, like take a little bit of sort of a step back and sort of think about what the aim of screening against sanctions, adverse and PEPs is, and is it just kind of a tick box exercise that you had to do, or what's the kind of the real reason for it?
That's a really good question, because like back when I started as a head of compliance and built up the email products, then I was struggling why I should do some things. And then I was asking from myself across the wider AML spaces, like, why do I think that these laws exist, or what are the regulators trying to achieve with this legislation, even if the legislation itself is not very well worded, or it's too complex, or like there is a lot of mess, and even if the technology doesn't exist, and if it like there is a lot of manual work, I'm always asking also today for myself, like, why do I think it's needed? And then when I'm asking this why question, then I'm starting to having, if I'm talking about sanctions against politicians, or against war criminals. Like back in 2001, when 9/11 terrorist attacks happened, like the US was under pressure, of course, like the most, and then sanctioning Afghanistani terrorists to stop, and their related people. Actually, they were trying to protect their country, and the whole Western world actually trained their forces to work together with US to stop like to sanction that this kind of for like terrorists. But now, like several years later, now in Europe, actually, due to the Russian war in Ukraine, we see how important it is to stop the funds of the war criminals who are sanctioned again. And like same thing is if you ask about political exposed persons, like why do they need to be screened? Of course, they're good people. Politicians are normally good people, and that they should not be restricted. But actually, financial institutions should know that they're working with people who have a bit higher risk because of their public positions, and we just need to help them to reduce the risk of bribery. And again, like if you read the news, then corrupted politicians, in some countries or some places, they still exist, and of course, like everyone's interest is to prevent this kind of corruption in the market. So again, that gives me idea like why I'm putting effort into my product development, or like why the different people in the banks and fintechs who are running the heavy, really complex sanction screening or PEP screening process, why exactly they're sacrificing their time. And the beautiful thing is that, well, beautiful, I think it's good. Positive thing is that actually when the people in the teams really see on hand and hands, like why exactly they're doing this work, they're getting super motivated as well. I mentioned before that when the war started in Ukraine, I saw a massive spike up in our other product, which is like a breach product, which is meant for the banks and fintechs to exchange information and RFIs between themselves. And we saw a massive jump in the sanction-related RFIs going back and forth between the banks, because everyone wanted to stop the money going into the Russia and sanctioned entities and people. And they worked over the weekends and the long nights to onboard their new teammates. And like again, it created massive amount of new work for them, but they did it with a pride because like they actually understand why they're doing it and what's the use of that. So that was like really motivating for me. And I see it repetitively coming back in the different crises or like the challenges that are happening in the world.
Yeah, I love that. I love the kind of the well, as Simon Sinek says, understand your why is kind of the best place to start.
Like just today, like when I was just checking our sanctions product today before our discussion here, and I saw like several sanction packages which have been recently launched against Syrian people and companies. And again, like if if you just take it as a static list, that's like yeah something we need to do. But actually, if you think what's happening in this region right now, then you start to realize okay that is important stuff, and I want to contribute my time and energy into that.
How did you communicate that with your team as you built that? I mean, you kind of discovered that sort of very early on, and I think that's amazing to really discover what the why that you're doing things. But how do you then pass that kind of motivation on to the rest of your team to get them to understand that it's not just a tick box exercise?
The honest answer is that back in Wise I wasn't able to do that really, because like it's as I said, like back in these happy days like 2013, 2015, when the Europe was still pretty passive in terms of like the sanction regimes, and like US, we were supporting them, but we didn't have internal inside of Europe like true reason that the why was very far away from me. And for me, it felt like a bureaucratic tick boxing. And I said to my team that that's like stupid thing that we need to do. And yeah, of course, to maintain our license, we need to do it. In order to pass the audits, we need to do it. But I really couldn't explain the true meaningful reason. And then the best I could do was actually to optimize their workload to build up better products which are more configurable, which would be using our internal data but external list providers data also in a better way, so that actually I could reduce the like pointless manual work for my team. So that was the main effort, like how to become more effective in what we're doing, and not to worry about why exactly it's needed. But now, as I said, like over the last couple of years, I've really understood this with my heart, and I'm now for today's team, I'm able to explain it much better than I was like back in the safe time when we didn't have the war around us actually.
Yeah, no, it's a really good point that you raise about the manual work, because once you are automating this and you're screening against kind of better lists, you're finding those bad actors. Actually, then you can show the real value then of, look, we found all of these people, and now this is stopped these bad actors from coming into our business. So. But then, I mean, this is the title of the webinar, right? Which is less guesswork, more results. So what do we mean by guesswork? What do we mean by that kind of those manual processes, or just guessing kind of, how and what we need to screen? What I'm interested from you, given your experience actually, is what are the typical common mistakes that you've seen that result from this guesswork?
Yeah, there are like several things. I would focus on like three main mistakes or obstacles or challenges that people are facing. Again, back when I was back in Wise days, again, when different product providers selling their sanction PEP screening products, they kept selling their product with the term which was like a fuzziness score, or like a what's the closeness of the names between like my customer and the sanctioned entities, and like there was like this fuzzy matching score, the magical 95 or 99 or 90. It was indicated like a percentage score or similarity score, which I was able to play around with, and like basically if the score was higher, then it was like more accurate, but actually there was higher risk that I'm missing some potential hits. And that's fine if you understand how this fuzzy matching is actually calculated. Like what's the formula, more or less complex formula or like logic behind it. But if it's just said that this fuzzy matching score is 97, then it actually doesn't mean anything. Although people by them heart they feel that it should mean something, and of course that it means something, but for them it doesn't mean because they didn't know what's the actual logic behind it, and this tracks them away from risk-based approach and risk-based decisions. They're just like using this kind of black box fine-tuning control button and thinking that okay, if I'm switching it from 95 to 97, then it's more secure. But it's not if you don't know what's behind it. So that's one learning is like I always when I see this kind of black box configurators, then I'm trying to understand what's behind it or how it's being calculated. So actually I can take the full responsibility for this risk-based decision. But unfortunately quite often it doesn't happen actually. That's like even regulators and auditors themselves are actually asking, like, is it 95 or 98 for you? And they don't know what's behind it. So it's like quite silly thing for me.
Yeah.
That's one thing, definitely. The other thing is that like a classical problem, if there are more sanction alerts, like those screening alerts, the more alerts are coming in, the more people need to be hired to resolve these alerts, because like if there is like more alerts, the backlog is growing, and to have long backlog of alerts which are unresolved for a long time, it's not good, especially for the customers, because the customers are waiting, their transactions are being stopped, and that's like common practice right now. But I've seen very little companies, a few companies who are actually able to learn from the existing people how the decisions are being made, and what are the arguments or like the rules that these people are applying to close down these alerts. And surprisingly, our research like study shows that it's like maybe between 10 or 15 like main cases or main typologies that are triggered in the people's heads when they're closing down the alerts almost automatically, because like it happens so fast, right? So and the point is that the second biggest mistake is that this people knowledge is not properly fed back into the algorithms which are raising alerts or should be resolving alerts automatically. So instead of hiring more and more people who repeat manually the same patterns, patterns, actually what you can do is from this less people, you can just write down what are their decision logic, put them into your screening system to resolve these alerts automatically or even prevent these alerts automatically. So that's like huge opportunity, and very few companies are using it. Just it's like human driven learning, or it's like in machine learning, it's called like supervised learning, but I don't want to even mention that fancy terms, because because quite often machine learning algorithms are referring to black boxes, which I'm not a great fan of, but
Yeah.
human decisions.
Let's not go down that path.
And the third thing is that actually people often mix up, or they don't mix up, but they don't think about the different approaches they can apply for the sanction screening versus PEP screening versus adverse media screening, because legal requirements are very different. Again, whys behind are very different. Like when we're chasing for politicians, it's not the same as chasing for sanctioned people, right? And then when chasing for some hints from media or adverse media, like negative media news, again, it's not the same as chasing like sanctioned entities. So, and which means that actually, as their legal bases are different, why behind is different, we have also luxury to apply different rules and different conditions and treat them as a separate processes or sub-processes under the screening discipline. And this gives a huge power again for the teams to stay focused on, okay, if I want to detect and stop really the sanctioned companies and people, then I'm using these kind of specific rules and conditions and lists. If I'm going after just detecting the politicians, then there's like risk appetite or like the risk-based decision room for risk-based decisions is much wider. I can decide, okay, these are the domestic small politicians. I don't care about them as a high risk, but actually for the country leads, I treat them as a high risk politicians. And same with the adverse media as well. I can select against which which lists I'm checking. I can select that the matching criteria can be a bit looser, or maybe more strict. And again, this gives a huge, if you have a product and if you have knowledge in the team, what are the levers that you can do in order to scale up and down your risk appetite and interest when dealing with sanctions, PEP and adverse mid, and then gives you huge power again to save huge amount of time of your operational teams and then to do the work in a smarter way.
That's awesome, thank you. So just so I understand then, just to recap, so the three common mistakes that you're saying is this kind of over-reliance. The number one is the over-reliance on this black box fuzzy matching score, the ultimate 95, 99, whatever it is that everyone's trying to get to. Number two is the not hiring more people, but being a little bit smarter and thinking about how you can automate what the people are doing first before you're adding new people to it. And then the third one is not mixing up or having a blanket set of rules for the different screening lists, basically customizing the screening rules against the list. Is that right?
Yes, and like that's exactly right, and that's why these things again, why they're super important is that they are providing nice segue into this efficiency versus effectiveness discussion that we keep facing, and if you understand like what are the main mistakes that like, maybe we couldn't call it mistakes, but like things to improve that people are doing, then actually we can also understand how to achieve greater efficiency and effectiveness. Just to visualize, maybe like I prepared a couple of slides this morning actually, because like just to show you how I'm thinking, or like especially in this screening world and let's say sanction screening world, why this it's important to keep in mind and understand how your decisions are impacting.
Yep.
I'll try to.
Here's something I prepared earlier.
I'll try to switch on the screen sharing. Just give me a second. Can you see it?
Yep, I can see. Thank you.
So basically, it's if we talk about screening or sanction screening, then we talk about efficiency and effectiveness, and the efficiency in the sanction screening world is that like a question is like how many transactions or I need to review manually to check manually in order to find some true positives or some hits, right? So like we can think about like if I have 10 transactions per day, maybe it's okay for my ops team to review all of these 10 transactions manually and suspend the payment and do the manual checking against all these crazy lists that are being provided, and then say that everything is fine and they open it again. So like it can be 100%, which is like obviously too much if your volume goes up. There can be also 0%, which is kind of super bad. Maybe it's like, or maybe it's good. Like it's like if you don't need to put any manual effort in and everything is automated, then you're fully relying, you're not doing anything at all, or maybe you're relying on some magical systems that are doing everything for you, but you don't have any visibility. Like, are you actually getting it? But the point is like the less manual work you do, the more efficient you are. Like that's easier, right? And like if you can automate the manual work, that's even better. If you're not doing any work at all, then maybe it's not good. And of course, like the more manual work you do, like proportionally more transactions you're reviewing manually, it's worse actually. You need to apply more manual work, or less efficient, right? And what we have seen with working with our customers is that like many companies have this efficiency rate, or basically the percentage of transactions that they review manually, it's above 1%, which is like 1% as a percent is not enough. But if you have like 1 million transactions per month, then you can imagine that it's 1% isn't too small at all. So actually they're struggling, and if your transaction volume grows from 1 million to 10 million, then you're in trouble, right? And we have seen that actually companies who are focusing on this efficiency improvement, actually they're getting down to the 0.1% of the manual reviews, which is fairly good. Again, they can move it down further even, but it's like industry best practice or sweet spot seems to be around 0.1%. And the other part is effectiveness. And that's the question is like, how many sanctioned entities how many sanctioned entities I can find from my system? Obviously, I would like to find all of them. Like there is no chance that I wouldn't want to detect less than 100%. Like it's a good target, right? I want to be perfect. And if I'm finding more, like if I'm finding all of them, then I'm more efficient, I'm more accurate, basically. Sorry, I'm more effective. Sorry, that typo here. I'm more effective. Like basically, I can detect all of the bad guys. Actually, life or regulators quite often force us and companies to find more than the 100%, because like it's when auditors come in. When I was meeting with auditors, then they said always that you need to have all the true positives, but actually you need to have also some suspicious cases that you also need to review who look like sanctioned, even if they're not true positive hits. You need to find them, because if you're not finding them, if you're not checking them, then you're in bad situation. It's like awkward, but that's where we are. And then the main challenge for the people who are working in the sanctions screening space is that how to find the same amount of true criminals or true sanctioned people with less manual work. So we want to find all of them, even a bit more, maybe 120%. And actually we want to spend like whatever 0.1% of the transactions reviewed manually. That's where we're focusing on. I'm not challenging or not. I'm not saying that we want to reduce or increase the amount of hits, like true positive hits that we find. But the main challenge for this talk is how to reduce the manual work that goes in to find the same amount of the true hits.
So we've actually had a question coming from the audience, but I think you've just explained it absolutely beautifully. You've just answered the question, but just for clarification or to read the question out, it's how can banks balance that need for efficiency in screening with the requirement to maintain high levels of accuracy and compliance? And yeah, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you've basically just answered that.
Yeah, it's like these are like two orthogonal directions of spaces. Like to conduct less manual work, it does not need to mean that you're less accurate in finding crime. It could mean if you're not doing it in a smart way, of course, it could mean that I'm doing less work. Could mean also that I'm doing less high quality work. But actually, if you know what are the levers, if you know what are the specific data features, data points, list parameters, like what's the legal expectation, how you apply this in your procedures, then it is possible to keep your accuracy in the same level where you want it to be, but just simply reduce the like pointless work that your team does.
Yeah. So we're kind of going into something else that I wanted to speak to you about today, and that is around data and data quality, because we talked a lot now about the kind of the efficiencies around like the processes and the automation and everything that kind of sits on top. But obviously you've got all of that data kind of sitting underneath, and the quality of that data is so important. So how do you ensure that the data that you have or your data sources are, high quality?
Yeah, it's you can think about this like in the 4 different sources of data, like your own data as a financial institution. What have you gathered from your customers, transactions, KYC information, basically data which sits in your database. That's one source. The other is when we talking about the sanction and the PEP screening, then this is about data that I'm getting from external data providers. It can be EU or UN or UFAC, or there are some commercial aggregators. I keep encouraging people to think that you don't need to use always these aggregators. You can also use the official data, which is coming from the national authorities, which is the most, again, it's maybe not the richest, but it's like the most original one. So what are the parameters of this second data set? How often I'm getting access to that? Then the third is actually the data or information I'm gathering, extra information I'm gathering from my own customers. So like in case of sanction hit, then I quite often need to query more information from my clients about the specific hit. So that's like a third. It's very small, but it's like very important operational data source, like a new data that I'm querying. And the fourth one is actually data that I'm getting from other institutions around me. Again, like I mentioned before, that institutions can do the RFIs, especially in the sanction context as well. If the sanction hit, then they can ask extra information from their counterparty, like institutions as well, which is like the fourth data source. So, and then we are playing around with these 4 data sources. And then there are questions like, okay, what are the specific fields? Like each data source carries. Like, of course, my internal data is the richest. Usually, like I have the most variables. The data I'm getting from the providers like LexisNexis or Dow Jones or these large providers, they are investing a lot into this quality of the data and also the content of the features of the data. How can I use all the features from there? And then it's like a operational part is like how often I'm getting this data from the list providers. Again, regulations are becoming tougher and tougher. Like it used to be, as said, like once a week it was like fine. Like then once a day used to be fine. Now it's like 3 times a day. Now people are talking about like real time, whatever it means, real time data access. So that's like I would say 2 main things around all these 4 data sources is like what are the fields, how well do you know what are the parameters that you can use in your operational procedures, and then second case is like what's the availability. Do you need to spend 2 days to query more data from your counterparty bank, or do you spend 2 minutes to get it from them? So.
Yeah. Okay. No, that makes perfect sense. So thinking then kind of about what we do with that data, kind of when it comes in, and how we use that kind of rich data now then as part of that kind of to help with the kind of efficiency. Can you tell me a little bit more about that? Like how do we kind of how do we use that data as part of the rules?
Yeah, maybe it's easier to show it because like it's again, as I said, like I've been studying mathematics for 25 years, and in my head, it's like this multidimensional thinking. I really enjoy this, but forgive me for that. But like maybe visual part is easier to follow.
Yeah, no, I'm all about the visuals.
I'm switching on the screen sharing again, and just showing the way how we have built it up in our product, sanction screening product, or like not only sanction screening product, and I'm super proud of that. So that's when I talked about data, I talked about mm, different features or parameters that each data object can carry, right? And when I'm setting up the new screening regime for my, let's say, transaction screening, then actually I can like deal with different fields, like data fields that I've gathered, like receiver name, maybe first name, last name, sender account, receiver account, the reference, bank name, and so on and so on. So there are actually different data fields that I can play around, and I need to treat each, or I can treat, it's smart to treat each data field separately, depending on the legal needs, depending on my own internal procedures, depending on my risk appetite. And I can define several parameters and conditions around these data fields, each of these data fields, and that's the beauty of the game actually for data analyst. I'm just like scrolling through. Basically, we can talk about the segments, how the matching happens, and also like what the data I screen against. And now when going into details, like just random examples of the list fields I'm using for screening, like and then sorry, I'm trying to control this machine, but I've selected fields that I want to screen. Then the second step in the process, like there is a process-wise good listing, like how to prevent double alerts, like the multiple alerts per entity or per person. Someone who has been screened already once, or one alert has been raised already for this person, so I don't want to have multiple alerts for the same person. I just want to resolve the first one. So basically, there are conditions how I can good list, we call it, uh, people or like entities. Then there is like a opportunity to define different segments or different treatment for different types of the entities. So like for outgoing payments, I have one set of rules. For incoming payments, I have the different set of rules. And again, it comes from the different aspects, which allow me to be more accurate, of course, but also more efficient in terms of reducing manual work. And like this segmentation is like one example is that there will be instant SEPA requirements coming in quite soon in Europe, right? And it says that in case of instant SEPA euro payments, your screening conditions need to be very different from all the other payment screening. Again, it's like logical expectation, but actually how to implement it, you would go into this defining new screening segments, and then you would apply it here, right? Again, but like you have source data coming from the features. In this particular example, I'm creating like a new segment for the card payments. Like in case of the card payment, again, sanction or like screening regime is a bit different, kind of easier maybe sometimes. And I want to apply this special segment or special rules for the card transactions. And I'm switching on that, like for incoming and then card transactions, I have these segments defined, and I can also say sometimes like I can exclude some segments that I don't want to apply these specific conditions for the given segments, which again help. Sorry.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you maybe play the video, does that show the segments bit? Because I think we're still looking at the good listing.
Sorry, it jumped into the next. Back to the correct place. Can you see it now?
No, we're still looking at the configuration layer. Maybe if you stop sharing your screen and then share again. So.
I'm back in the screen.
Yeah,
Sharing.
yeah.
Okay. So
Perfect.
basically, I can create also the excluded segments here, and like what does it mean is like I'm sorry. Then I can define also the matching algorithm, like what's the matching score, matching rules. Then I can select what lists I want to screen against, like against sanction list or like EU financial sanctions. Maybe I'm selecting. And as I said before, also like I don't need to touch the adverse media or PEPs too much, right? There are like sub parameters, like how do I define the EU fin sanctions through the list that I'm like in this example, the Stone Jones list is being used. I can create a new like Interpol list, which is like name for the set of international sanction regimes, selecting Interpol from here, law enforcement, and coming from some special countries or some special regimes. Again, that's like power that comes through the configuration, like the access to data, understanding what are the data fields, and being able to use these data fields in operational decisions. And when I'm running the process like that, then I can define that, okay, for this sender name, I'm applying these specific conditions, segment conditions. I'm applying the fuzzy logic, which is like clearly defined fuzzy logic behind, and I'm checking Dow Jones sanction lists against it. So maybe it was like a bit rush to show. Sorry for that, but it's like behind every page or every item, there are actually real data fields that either you have collected or your data provider has collected, and you have luxury to use each of these data fields in very, very narrow specific way, which will allow you to prevent wrong alerts when you're setting up the screening system.
So we all have access to that really good data, those 4 data points that you said. And what you're saying is by using that type of configuration with the rules, you can get smarter and smarter and smarter and more towards that efficiency score that that you were showing on your graph.
And the key is that actually each financial institution, like AML or screening team, they need to have power and access themselves to this functionality. It's not about your provider who would do that if you pay them a lot, but actually you need to have a tool, internal or external, which allows you to take the control and then fine tune, because you keep learning constantly, and you keep improving. And that's something that your technology vendors cannot do for you.
Yeah. Well, you're hiring clever people in your team, right? These AML analysts, and the best thing to do is to give them the tool to allow them to use their intelligence that they have.
Go often. I'm recommending for AML teams to hire also data analysts or data scientists into their teams. They're
Mm.
hiring super good compliance people, they're hiring super good operational people, but they're often missing the data analyst who can actually utilize the whole data value that they have, but they're heavily underusing it right now.
Yeah, yeah. I could ask you loads more questions about this, but there's one thing that we've got 5 minutes left, and there's something I really want to pick your brain on whilst I've got you. With your experience that you have, I could not let you go away without asking you this question. So if you was thinking back to your time at Wise and when you had to set up the screening process from scratch, from the start, what advice would you give to somebody that was having to do the same? What's your kind of step-by-step guide, I suppose, for implementing a new screening solution? If you could do that very quickly in 5 minutes.
Yeah, like step by step, it's a good question. Maybe there are like five, maybe eight different steps. Like if
Okay.
I'm thinking
4 minutes, go.
like first of all, just be clear with your like risk-based approach. Like it's for sanctions, you need to do very strict screening for for PEP and adverse media. You have a lot of flexibility, and then you can take risk-based approach and be clear with that. Write it down as well. Like what's your risk-based approach? Then select the lists that you really need to for the specific regions. I often see that like companies buy in huge amount of lists, but actually they need only list for EU and OFAC and UK, EU, and that's it, like 4 lists. But they have 100 lists, and they're like drowning under the huge number of alerts. Be very specific. If you're working in specific country, maybe the country-specific list is enough already. Third point is that you need to understand what's behind the fuzziness or fuzzy score. As I mentioned before, also don't blindly trust that it's a good thing, but actually try to ask from your engineers or from your vendors like how this fuzziness is defined, and then you can make mature decisions based on that. Then you need to define which data fields and how exactly you're going to screen. As I showed in this video as well, you have lots of data fields in your system, and maybe you're using only a very small fraction of them, which actually gives you blindness and limits your ability to automate things and to reduce the manual work. I would say also that the fifth step is like you need to be aware of the different needs of different segments, or like transactions incoming versus outgoing versus card payments. There are very different needs versus your own consumers, like your own customers. How often and how exactly you need to screen them. The requirements are pretty different, and the tools and techniques are pretty different for those. And then the sixth step is that once you have like all this in place, then actually you can set up the different alert thresholds and then the rules, which can be different as well. Like parameter dimensions are the same, but parameter values are different per different lists. So again, that was something I demonstrated. Then second point is really important, which I didn't cover actually today, is that define the alert clearance rules. You still will have lots of alerts triggered by system. Doesn't matter how good it is, but before handing these alerts over to the human like operational team, define rules or decisions when these alerts can be automatically closed down. They were raised, that's good, but close it down. 90% of these alerts can be closed down manually if you set it up properly.
Yep. And the last one, so number 8, is that we've got like, can you do that in 30 seconds? Because Zoom is harsh and it's going to cut us off.
Last one is learn and iterate, basically. Like implement it, and every month, every quarter, just redo it again to make it better. That's it.
I like that. Completes the loop. Brilliant. Like I said, that's so many questions. I could talk to you for hours on this. Thank you so much. You've been, you've been great. Really, really brilliant. And I hope the audience has enjoyed and learned as much as I have today. So thank you, Taavi, for your time, and thank you to the audience for listening today. If you have any questions, then please reach out to us or visit the website at salv.com. Thank you.
Thank you all. Bye.